Ethan remained motionless in the doorway. The bride was evidently an impatient person. She lifted the veil herself. Candlelight flickered across the room. Ethan had not yet seen the face clearly. He scrambled to shut the heavy oak door. No one could know about this secret. His back pressed against the wood. He swallowed hard, staring at the bed. He nervously questioned the seated figure. He asked who this person was. The figure wore a stunning white gown. Ethan tried to feign ignorance, but he saw the sharp eyes and broad shoulders. The word madam felt scalding on his tongue. He simply could not say it. The person spoke in a calm, low voice. He introduced himself as Julian Sterling. As he spoke, he began to remove the gown. The layers of silk were complex and heavy. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. He rushed forward before Julian was exposed. He grabbed Julian's wrist to stop him. Ethan stammered, unable to form a sentence. He struggled to find the right words. This situation was beyond his comprehension. He was a soldier, not a politician. The old patriarch should stick to business. He had no right to play matchmaker. Ethan wondered about the patriarch's mind. What strange thoughts must live there? Julian's lips curved into a wry smile. He mockingly admitted his own haste. He suggested he should help the general undress first. Julian's slender fingers moved toward Ethan's belt. Ethan immediately reacted, his hands flying out. One hand stopped Julian from removing his clothes. The other stopped Julian from removing his own. Sweat began to bead on Ethan's forehead. His gaze fell upon wine glasses on a table. He suggested they had not shared a drink yet. Julian stood, his face incredibly close. Ethan looked up at the man who was taller. For the first time, he felt an urge to run. He was half-dragged toward the small table. Julian poured 2 glasses of bourbon. He handed one to Ethan with a quiet order. He told him to drink it quickly. They had things to do afterward. Ethan saw a grim resolve in Julian's eyes. He felt that he was the thing to be done. After they drank the bourbon, Julian shed his outer gown with swift motions. Ethan had no time to stop him. Julian approached slowly, his expression dark. He told the general it was late. He stated that it was time for bed. Bed? What did he mean by bed? Ethan's mind raced for a solution. He decided that a preemptive strike was best. He believed waiting would lead to disaster. He lunged at Julian first. He intended to pin him down. Julian was caught off guard by the attack. He stumbled backward with Ethan in his arms. Ethan panicked, reaching out to grab something. He clumsily tore Julian's silk chemise. Julian's eyes flashed with sudden anger. A large fist flew towards Ethan's face. There was no technique in the punch. It was filled with pure emotion. 2 muffled groans echoed in the room. Julian clutched his head. Ethan covered his eye, and they both sat up. Their eyes met in the silent room. The silence was heavy and unnerving. Julian stared at him for a moment. He asked why Ethan did not dodge. He questioned his status as a general. Ethan dropped his hand, revealing a bruised eye. He was a general, not a demigod. The punch was too close and too fast. How could anyone possibly dodge that? Julian looked so delicate and refined. But his punch was like a battering ram. Julian knew he was in the wrong. He asked stiffly why Ethan tore his clothes. Ethan's cheek throbbed with a dull ache. Anger surged through him, and he didn't explain. He stated they had a ceremony. They drank together. Julian was his spouse now. He asked if he could not touch him. Julian's face shifted between pale and flushed. He was clearly furious and humiliated. He ignored his torn clothes. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. He looked like a sacrifice on an altar. Ethan noticed his trembling eyelashes. A strange feeling washed over him. This man was forced to marry another man. This surely was not his own choice. Ethan reached out to cover him properly. Julian looked over, confused by the gesture. Ethan walked to the small chaise lounge. He spoke gruffly with his bruised face. Sleeping with an exposed stomach causes chills. He tripped over the discarded gown on the floor. Julian's expression was peculiar. He asked why Ethan was not sleeping in the bed. Ethan did not open his eyes. He feared Julian would kick him at night. He told Julian to take the bed. Ethan turned over on the narrow lounge. He was exhausted from the day's events. Sleep quickly began to overtake him. He mumbled for Julian to get some rest. He said Julian could think he cared for his spouse. In the middle of the night, a soft rustling sound woke Ethan. He opened his eyes to see Julian above him. He couldn't tell what Julian was doing. The moonlight cast shadows on his face, created a surprisingly eerie image. Ethan raised a hand to his bruised eye. Then he thought better of it. He covered his other, uninjured eye instead. In his confusion, he shut his eyes tightly. He shouted for Julian not to hit his face. He would be too ashamed to be seen tomorrow. A vein throbbed on Julian's temple. He threw the quilt he was holding over Ethan. He muttered that Ethan should just freeze. After a brief struggle under the blanket, Julian went to bed and covered himself. Ethan cautiously peeked out. He saw Julian's resentful back. He then looked at the quilt covering him. He whispered softly to the figure. He reminded him to keep his stomach covered. Julian's fist, resting by his side, clenched. Ethan was startled by the movement. He quickly hid his face back under the quilt. The capital's politics were a tangled web. The patriarch's two sons were rivals for power. Ethan's father supported the elder son. Julian's father stood with the younger son. The patriarch's order for this marriage was strategic. It was a masterstroke of disruption. He did not want his allies getting too comfortable. If powerful families became too friendly, their ambitions might turn to the main seat. Because of this complicated situation, Ethan was reluctant to visit Julian's family, but he had to do it for Julian's sake. He did not want people to look down on him, so they had to make the formal visit. The bruise on his face was a problem. He delayed the visit for several days. When they arrived at the Sterling estate, a servant immediately led Julian away. It was for the best. Ethan had things to discuss with his father. Julian's presence would have been awkward. Ethan had been thinking about the situation. The patriarch was eccentric, but not insane. He would not send a man to be his bride. So Ethan had his own people investigate. He sat in the parlor, tracing the rim of a teacup. He thought about the report he received. The intended bride was Julian's older sister, Elara. She had refused to marry Ethan. Julian's mother had heard rumors about Ethan. She heard he preferred men, so she threatened Julian to protect her daughter. She used his birth mother's burial as leverage. She forced her disfavored stepson into the car. Ethan watched Julian's father, Mr. Sterling. The man sipped his tea calmly. He showed no signs of guilt or panic. He clearly knew that Ethan knew the truth. Ethan had no patience for games. He set his cup down with a sharp click. He said this deception was a high crime. He accused Mr. Sterling of immense audacity. Mr. Sterling just smiled dismissively. He claimed not to understand the accusation. The patriarch only knew a Sterling child was married. The specific identity was not mentioned. How could it be a crime if no one knew? Ethan almost laughed at the man's gall. He asked if Mr. Sterling was blind. He stated that Julian was a man. Mr. Sterling advised him to treat Julian as a woman. He stirred his tea, unconcerned. Even if Ethan reported it, the consequences were small. Only Julian, the unimportant son, would suffer. Ethan narrowed his eyes at the man. His confidence came from the younger son's backing. His blatant disregard for Julian's life was shocking. An unfamiliar fire ignited within Ethan. His father always advised diplomacy with politicians. He said they could ruin a simple soldier with words. Ethan took a deep breath. He suppressed the urge to curse the man. He said, "Mr. Sterling was cruel and faithless. His prestigious education was clearly wasted." He shouted that Julian was his son. Mr. Sterling's face turned a sickly green. He claimed the boy looked feminine enough. With some makeup, he could pass for a woman. He asked if the general was not pleased. Ethan slammed his palm on the table. He shouted that he was pleased with nothing. Tea sloshed from the cup onto the wood. He thought he was dealing with a rational man. He now realized Mr. Sterling was a fool. Ethan stood and walked toward the exit. He feared he would lose control. The teapot was dangerously close to his hand. He could now imagine Julian's life here. It must have been full of fear and sorrow. He ignored Mr. Sterling's foul expression. He called out in a loud voice. He demanded to know where Julian was. He was taking him home now. What was the point of this visit? This place was run by a madman. It was better not to see him at all. The servants all kept their heads down. A bad feeling crept into Ethan's heart. He grabbed one by the collar. He demanded to know Julian's location. Years on the battlefield gave him a fierce aura. The young servant was too scared to speak. Ethan shoved him away in disgust. He began searching the estate himself. He found a courtyard with a locked door. He heard a faint female voice from inside. She said Julian had no right to be arrogant. She called him a worthless concubine. She threatened to sell him to a brothel. She claimed nobody would care about him. She then ordered someone to strip him. Hearing this, Ethan kicked the door open. The door and its frame flew across the yard. Everyone inside froze and looked at him. The scene before him made his blood boil. His heart constricted with a sharp pain. Several men held Julian down with sticks. They were tearing at his clothes. Julian's eyes were empty, devoid of emotion. He lay on the ground without resisting. His fair skin was smeared with dirt. He looked utterly devoid of life. They had already removed his outer coat. It was a fine moon-white jacket. Ethan had picked it for him that morning. It was masculine yet elegant. Perfectly complemented Julian's cool grace. Julian had never been defiant with him. He was always respectful and diligent. Ethan had never seen reluctance on his face, but he could feel the tension within him. Julian was like a tightly drawn bowstring. The slightest pressure could make it snap. Therefore, Ethan never pushed him. Mr. Sterling was right about one thing. Julian was exceptionally beautiful for a man. He was like a fragile piece of jade. Ethan would not even harm a hair on his head. These people dared to humiliate him like this. He kicked the men holding Julian away. Julian's desolate eyes showed a flicker of life. He whispered Ethan's title. Ethan helped Julian to his feet. He fixed his torn clothing. He asked if he was hurt. Julian wiped blood from his lip. His breathing was unsteady. He shook his head, saying he was fine. Ethan straightened his collar. He told Julian to watch closely. The general would repay this insult in full. He looked at the young woman surrounded by servants. He picked up one of the wooden sticks. He advanced on her slowly. He asked if she called Julian a concubine. The first blow broke a servant's leg. He said Julian was a man forced into this role. The second blow broke another's arm. Even as a male spouse, he held a high title. He was brought into the house with full honors. When did he become a mere concubine? By now, no one dared to approach him. The entire courtyard was deathly silent. Julian had always been stoic. He accepted his fate without complaint. He endured humiliation with quiet resignation. But now, just a few words from Ethan. They brought tears to his eyes. The stick in Ethan's hand snapped. He grabbed the young woman by her hair. He slammed her face onto a stone table. A maid screamed and rushed forward. She cried out for her mistress, Elara. Ethan threw the broken stick at her, struck her hard, and she collapsed. He looked at the terrified Elara. He asked if she thought his house had no master. Did she dare to insult his family's head? He asked if stripping people was fun. He applied more pressure, his voice a roar. He threatened to strip her and parade her in public. Elara cried out in pain and fear. She pleaded that Julian was just a bastard. She asked if Ethan would truly defy her family for him. Ethan snorted with contempt. He was a decorated general, a respected figure. Her father was just a mid-level secretary. He held no fear of him. He sneered at her pathetic justification. She abused Julian because of his low birth. He declared he would see the patriarch today. He would use his military honors for Julian. He would secure him a noble title. He had earned many commendations over the years. From now on, she and her father, they would have to bow to Julian respectfully. They would call him by his proper title. Elara's eyes widened in disbelief. She mumbled that he must be insane. She reminded him that Julian was a man. A bloody smile touched Ethan's lips. He patted her cheek menacingly. He used his interrogation tone on her. He dared her to spread the story. He made a solemn promise to her. She would be ruined and dead before Julian was. Just then, Mr. Sterling arrived with more men. He saw his daughter pinned to the table. He pointed a trembling finger at Ethan. He demanded that he release his daughter. His men saw the carnage in the yard. They hesitated, afraid to move forward. Ethan lifted Elara by her collar. He said he should thank Mr. Sterling. If this creature had married him, his home would never know peace. He threw her onto the ground. Nearby servants scrambled to help her. They checked her face for injuries. Ethan dusted off his hands. A cold smile played on his lips. He announced that from this day forward, Julian had no connection to the Sterling family. In the future, they would address him properly. They would call him by his title, or they would face the general's wrath. Without another word, he took Julian's hand. He led the stunned man away from that vile place. Once they were inside the carriage, Ethan looked at the silent man beside him. His anger flared up again. He said Julian was quick to punch him. But today he was like a declawed cat. He just let them bully him. Julian pursed his lips, his gaze lowered. He said he did not want to cause trouble. Ethan crossed his arms and made a sound of disgust. He felt his teeth grind together. He told Julian to listen carefully. If anyone ever disrespected him again, he should use his fighting spirit. He should hit them back with full force. Ethan would cover any medical costs. If he killed them, Ethan would bury the body. Julian fidgeted with his sleeve. His hands rested properly on his knees. A sliver of light came through the curtain. It illuminated his face perfectly. It seemed to melt the frost from his features. The patriarch was old now. The power struggles in the capital were intense. One wrong step could lead to ruin. Julian's voice was warm and gentle. It was hard to speak harshly to him. He said Elara was right about one thing. Ethan should not have fought the Sterlings for him. Ethan shook his head in disagreement. He said there was no relationship to ruin. Mr. Sterling had often complained about him. He reported him to the patriarch frequently. Ethan slouched in his seat. He propped his legs up on the opposite bench. Besides, the more they fought, the more at ease the man in the palace would be. Julian shifted to let Ethan rest his head on his lap. Ethan found a comfortable position. He toyed with the jade pendant on Julian's belt. He continued explaining the political game. A strong alliance between military and politics. That would give the old patriarch nightmares. He would curse them for their unity. He then took Julian's hand in his. He felt the thin calluses on his palm. There were small cuts from rough work. Ethan frowned at the sight of them. He said even without these reasons, he would never let anyone bully Julian. Julian pulled down his sleeve to hide his hand. His fingers gently curled around Ethan's. It was a comforting, gentle gesture. He silently straightened Ethan's messy clothes. He said Ethan's actions today would cause gossip. The entire capital would know about it. To avoid public censure, there would surely be punishment back home. Ethan cleaned his ear nonchalantly. He said it would just be kneeling in the chapel. He gave Julian a reassuring look. He said he was very familiar with that place. A slight smile touched Julian's lips. It was like the moon gracing the night. He had always thought the general was simple, but now he realized it was a facade. He possessed a much deeper wisdom. Ethan wrinkled his nose at the comment. So Julian initially thought he was an idiot? His vision became a little blurry. He could not suppress a yawn. He had slept poorly on the small lounge. He had not rested well for weeks. Lying down now, the carriage's gentle rocking. It made him incredibly sleepy. He mumbled something about life. Sometimes it was better to be a little foolish. Then his head tilted to the side. He fell fast asleep. On the frontier, he was always on high alert. Even back in the capital, he stayed vigilant. So when the carriage stopped, he immediately opened his eyes. He saw Julian's handsome face. Julian had fallen asleep leaning against the wall. His arm was positioned to protect Ethan. It had kept him from falling to the floor. Ethan was mesmerized for a moment. He wanted to touch the gentle curve of his brow. His fingers just grazed Julian's chin. He suddenly remembered their situation. In Julian's eyes, he was just another man. Julian would surely dislike his touch. He did not dare move any further. He did not want to disturb this ethereal person. Julian's eyelashes fluttered slightly. He slowly opened his eyes. He saw Ethan's hand, still outstretched. He paused for a second. Then a smile touched his lips. He leaned his head down slightly. He brought his forehead to Ethan's fingertips. He let their skin touch. Ethan felt the warmth spreading from his fingers. His face remained calm and composed, but inside his heart was a raging storm. He sat up, bracing his hands on either side. He leaned in close to Julian. He boldly studied the man's face. Seeing him so close, Julian's eyes sparkled, and he chuckled softly. He asked why the general was staring, as if he had never seen him before. Ethan nodded seriously. He admitted he had never looked closely before. Julian leaned back against the cushions. He shifted to a more comfortable position. He raised an eyebrow inquisitively. He asked Ethan for the reason. Ethan looked at him with great sincerity. He said he was afraid Julian would kick his face. A servant's voice came from outside. He announced their arrival at the patriarch's residence. He warned that tardiness would be disrespectful. Ethan got up from his position over Julian. He told him to wait in the carriage. He promised he would be back soon. Julian remained in his relaxed pose. His eyes were full of a soft, lingering smile. He nodded and agreed to wait. After getting what he needed from the old man, Ethan did not waste time with pleasantries. He strode quickly toward the main gate. Along the way, he met Sylvia Thorne. She was the daughter of a powerful senator. He walked past her without a glance. A scent of perfume wafted toward him. She stumbled and fell into his arms. He instinctively caught her. An image of Julian's smiling face flashed in his mind. He was so startled he dropped her. Sylvia fell to the ground. She looked up at him with teary eyes. She asked why he was so cruel. Her tears made Ethan's head ache. He remembered Julian was waiting for him. He walked around her quickly. He started spouting nonsense. He claimed to be blind and unable to see. He told her to find someone else to trick. He then broke into a run. He was breathing heavily when he reached the carriage. Julian patted his back gently. He asked why he was in such a hurry. He joked about a wolf chasing him. Ethan nodded, then shook his head. Sylvia was not a wolf. She was much more frightening. He handed the document to Julian. It was an official decree freshly signed. The seal was still warm. Julian's eyes widened in surprise. He thought Ethan's promise of a title was just a casual remark. It was a high-ranking honor. Even if Ethan died on the frontier, this title would protect Julian for life. Julian's hand tightened on the decree. His expression became rigid for a moment. He told Ethan not to say such things. Ethan was accustomed to life and death. On the battlefield, it could happen in an instant. To him, it was an ordinary matter. He sat up straight, feeling serious. He needed to tell Julian something important. As long as the insurgents existed, the nation's frontier would never be safe. In another month, he had to return. He had to lead his troops back. He returned this time for the marriage. Now that it was settled, he had to go back to his post. The carriage wheels rumbled on the stone road. The red stones on Julian's earrings swayed. They reflected tiny specks of light. His expression was calm and gentle. He said he would go with Ethan. Ethan considered the idea. Leaving Julian alone in the capital was risky. The Sterling family would surely cause trouble. And if his true identity were discovered, the consequences would be dire for both. The frontier was harsh, but safer. Under Ethan's protection, he would be fine. No one would dare to bully him there. He agreed that Julian should come along. Keeping him close would bring peace of mind. When they got home, it was getting dark. Without any prompting from his father, Ethan went straight to the family chapel. The kneeling cushion in the center was worn. It had 2 distinct indentations from his knees. He looked at the memorial plaques on the altar. He lit 3 sticks of incense for them. The first time he knelt here, he had poured ink into his father's teapot. His father's teeth were black for 3 days. He was young then and very scared. He was always afraid of ghosts. After kneeling here many times, he lost his fear. He came to understand something important. Only those who died defending their country had the right to be honored on this altar. This room was filled with loyal souls. Why would they ever harm him? They would protect him. They would ensure his safe return from every battle. A fresh, clean scent drifted past him. A slender figure knelt on the cushion beside him. Julian had removed his hairpins and ornaments. He wore a simple, plain robe. He also lit 3 sticks of incense. He knelt beside Ethan. He bowed his head 3 times respectfully. Ethan gazed at the plaques. He explained his family's long history. They had served the country for generations. He turned to look at Julian's profile. He asked if Julian knew his greatest wish. Julian turned to look at him. His eyes were as calm as still water. He waited for Ethan to continue. He wanted to defend the frontier for his whole life. He wished that in his lifetime, the people there could live free from war. A breeze blew through the hall. The banners on the wall rustled softly. The room was quiet, yet full of presence. He stared at the smoke from the incense. If he could defeat the insurgents, The nation would be unified and peaceful. Future generations would be safe. His voice trembled slightly. Then no more of his family would die in battle. If one more plaque was needed on that altar, he hoped it would be his. Julian whispered his first name. It was the first time he had ever said it. Something sharp and sweet pierced Ethan's heart. That day would come. They would both be alive to see it. His voice was soft, but his conviction was strong. Ethan stared at him, stunned. He murmured that Julian seemed different now. Julian smiled gently. He asked how he was different. Ethan searched for the right words. He struggled to find a fitting description. After some thought, he found one. He felt that Julian would not punch his face anymore. Julian let out a soft laugh. How could he ever bear to hurt him again? Ethan asked why. Julian looked at him, his eyes deep and tender. The general was different in his eyes now. He knelt until late into the night. Eventually, he fell asleep while kneeling. This was not difficult for him. He could march for days without sleep. He could even sleep while standing. But when he woke the next morning, he was lying in his own long-abandoned bed. His heart skipped a beat. He checked his clothes and found them untouched. He breathed a sigh of relief. He saw Julian curled up on the small lounge. As if sensing his gaze, the person on the lounge slowly opened his eyes. Julian propped himself up. His dark hair spilled over his open robe. The inner shirt hung loosely on his frame. He smiled at Ethan. He asked if the general had slept well. His voice was husky from sleep. The low, soft tone was incredibly seductive. It was enough to make anyone blush. Ethan dove back under the covers. He finally understood how leaders fell for beauty. For a smile like that from Julian, he would willingly face any danger. The invitation had arrived yesterday. It was for Sylvia Thorne's coming-of-age party. The party was in 5 days. On the day of the event, Julian had to accompany him as his spouse. At home, Ethan never made him wear makeup. He did not make him wear women's clothes. In the carriage, Ethan saw Julian's attire. The dangling earrings and ornate hairpins. A sudden wave of irritation washed over him. These things did not belong on him. Julian turned to look at him. He asked gently if something was wrong. Ethan's brow was furrowed. He said the earrings looked bad on him. Julian touched his earlobe. He offered to take them off if Ethan disliked them. Ethan grabbed his wrist. He said harshly that the hairpins also annoyed him. Julian did not get angry. He put down the earring he was holding. He reached for the hairpins in his hair. The anger in Ethan's chest intensified. He continued his tirade. What if he found the whole outfit offensive? What would Julian do then? Julian watched him quietly. He did not know what had provoked this outburst. He simply lowered his eyes. His slender fingers moved to his belt. He began to untie it. Ethan realized what he had said. His heart tightened with regret. He cursed himself for his cruelty. He wanted to see defiance in Julian, but he had forgotten something crucial. If Julian could resist, he would never have ended up in his bed. Ethan stopped his hand. He apologized for his behavior. He said he must have been out of his mind. A soft sigh escaped Julian's lips. He said he was willing to do these things. Ethan looked up in surprise. Before he could speak, the carriage stopped. A servant announced their arrival. Julian straightened his clothes. His gaze was as calm and deep as water. He told Ethan not to worry. He insisted that he was willing. The earrings were left on the small table. He did not put them back on. The men and women were in separate areas. After entering, he and Julian parted ways. Ethan was not good at socializing. He could not play their political games. After a few drinks, he made an excuse to leave. He found a quiet corner for some fresh air. He rubbed his temples wearily. He wondered how Julian was faring. He had heard the women's social circles were just as treacherous as the men's. It must be difficult for him too. He felt a tug on his leg. He looked down to see a small child. The boy was hugging his leg. He looked up at him timidly. Ethan crouched down to the boy's level. He gently pinched his soft cheek. He asked if he was lost from his parents. Tears welled up in the little boy's eyes. He said his mother went to buy him candy. Ethan's mind went blank for a moment. He blurted out a thoughtless comment. Candy? He joked that his mother had abandoned him. The boy's suppressed tears burst forth. He cried until his face was red. He sobbed that it was not true. He accused Ethan of lying. Ethan stared, completely flustered. He had not expected such a strong reaction. Perhaps he could use this on the battlefield. Maybe he could scare away young enemy soldiers. A shadow fell over them. Someone picked up the crying child. Ethan looked up to see Julian. He was gently patting the boy's back. He was comforting him in a low voice. Ethan stood up, feeling awkward. Soon, a servant, likely the boy's nanny, came. She took the crying child away. Julian watched them go. He sighed softly. He noted Ethan's lack of skill with children. He wondered what he would do with his own. Ethan leaned against a pillar, arms crossed. He said nonchalantly there was nothing to do. Julian could not bear children. His military uniform was born from sacrifice. He was destined to wear it for life. Neither he nor Julian could have children. That would create a major crisis. He had a duty to his family and his country. He had never considered having heirs. Julian was speechless for a moment. He was at a loss for words. Ethan enjoyed seeing him flustered. He decided to tease him a little more. If Julian could give him a child, he would pluck the stars from the sky for him. He feigned a look of disappointment. He lamented that he would never know that joy. Julian shook his head with a small smile. He said if such a thing existed, he would be the first to try it. No matter the cost, he would let Ethan experience that happiness. Ethan was stunned by his bold words. Now it was his turn to be speechless. He did not know what to do. In the end, he simply fled the scene. He went back to the main hall. Soon after, he found Julian. He told him it was time to leave. As they reached the entrance, they were stopped. Sylvia Thorne, the host, stood in their way. She held 2 glasses of wine. She asked if he would honor her with a drink. Ethan wanted to say no, but all the guests were watching. He knew he could not be so rude. He had barely ever spoken to Sylvia. He did not know why she kept approaching him. Something was clearly not right. He stared at the wine, hesitating. Just then, a wealthy-looking young man appeared. He sidled up next to Sylvia. He mentioned his father was the new defense secretary. He urged Ethan to accept the drink. His eyes lit up when he saw Julian. He was truly a fool courting death. Ethan clenched his fists. He stepped in front of Julian, blocking the view. He asked coldly if his face was made of gold. What made him so important? Even his father would not dare speak to him so. He stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. He warned the man about his wandering eyes. If he kept staring, he would lose them. The man was clearly a spoiled brat. The once lively hall had gone quiet. Everyone was pretending not to watch. They held their glasses and waited for the show. Ethan saw Sylvia's embarrassed face. He said he could not accept her drink. Across the room, her father's smile faltered. Sylvia gritted her teeth, refusing to move. She was determined to make him drink. Ethan's patience finally ran out. He was about to push her aside. Suddenly, a hand reached out, took the glass of wine. Julian drank the contents in one go. He said the general had drunk too much. He asked them to forgive his drunken words. He stated that spouses were one entity, so he would drink this wine for Ethan. Sylvia looked panicked when Julian drank. Ethan knew something was wrong. He grabbed Julian and rushed out the door. As soon as the carriage started moving, he lunged at Julian, trying to open his mouth. He yelled at him to spit it out. He knew the wine was tainted. Julian's body suddenly went limp. He fell with Ethan onto the lounge. His breath on Ethan's hand was hot. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The clarity in his eyes was fading fast. His voice was strained. He begged Ethan to get up first. Ethan was not slow to understand. He knew what was in that wine. It was originally meant for him. The drug was fast-acting. Sylvia had not intended for him to leave. Julian dug his nails into the upholstery. He was fighting for control. His eyes flew open in pain. He groaned and rolled onto his stomach. Ethan yelled at the driver. He ordered him to get back home immediately. He was sweating from anxiety. This situation had to remain a secret. Should he throw Julian into ice water? That would surely make him sick. When they arrived home, he dismissed the servants. He helped the struggling man inside. He stood at the door and shouted. No one was to disturb him for any reason. He slammed the door shut. He turned to see Julian on the bed. He had already torn off his outer layers, but he clutched his inner shirt tightly. He spoke with the last of his sanity. His voice was hoarse. He begged Ethan to tie him up. Ethan wiped his face and removed his own gear. He walked to the side of the bed. He looked at Julian's dazed expression. He leaned down. It was just a light, fleeting kiss, but it shattered Julian's remaining control. In a blur of motion, their positions reversed. Julian grabbed his hand. He pressed Ethan down onto the bed. Pain flashed in Julian's eyes. Veins stood out on his temples. His frantic heartbeat echoed in Ethan's ears. It made his own vision swim. He released Ethan's wrist and pulled away. He mumbled something about consent. He could not do this. Ethan grabbed the back of his head. He pulled him back down. He told him to stop talking. He said that he was willing. What was left unfinished on their wedding night was thoroughly completed this evening. Old habits die hard. The next day at dawn, Ethan woke up. Thanks to his rigorous military life, anyone else would have been unable to move. He took a moment, then shifted Julian's arm. He sat up, his lower back aching. As he got dressed, he heard movement behind him. He did not flinch. The man belonged to him now. There was no need for shyness. Julian put on his inner shirt. He got up to help Ethan dress. He was silent, his lips pressed together. His usual smile was gone. Ethan sighed. He pointed out that Julian had taken advantage of him. So why did Julian look so wronged? Julian lowered his eyes, fixing a jade pendant. His voice was flat, emotionless. He asked why Ethan had helped him last night. Why? Ethan answered with sincerity. It was because he liked him. Julian looked as if he had been struck. He looked up at Ethan, his eyes wide. He seemed unable to understand. Ethan said Julian was the well-read one. He moved closer to look at him. Were the words "I like you" so hard to grasp? The morning light created a halo around Julian. He looked radiant, but he lost his usual calm. He just stared at Ethan, saying nothing. Ethan suddenly felt nervous. He could command a massive army with ease. But this one person in front of him, his expressions and movements, even the way his hair stirred in the breeze, it all threw him into disarray. He lost his composure completely. He braced his hands on the table behind Julian. He leaned in, looking up at him. He would not let him avoid the question. He said it was too late for regrets. He was the general and Julian was his spouse. Julian returned to his senses and smiled. The brilliance in his eyes was captivating. Ethan could not look away. Julian leaned down into the space Ethan created. He was trapped, but willingly so. He whispered that the general could be greedier. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He did not understand what that meant. Julian placed one hand on the table. The other rested on Ethan's waist. His eyes were overflowing with affection. He would be the general's spouse for a lifetime. Ethan ran again. Julian seemed so gentle and refined, but he had no regard for stuffy conventions. He was incredibly bold. Outside, Ethan went straight to the barracks. He needed his men to investigate. Why did Sylvia drug him? And that arrogant son of the defense secretary. He needed to be taught a lesson. The general's man was not to be coveted. His spies had just been dispatched. A messenger arrived from the palace. The patriarch wanted to see him. Sylvia had been sent away overnight. She was banished from the capital for life. Pampered young lady like her would suffer greatly in such a desolate place. The defense secretary's son, the old patriarch, had dealt with him too. He told Ethan to drop the matter. The younger son, who backed Sylvia, was still useful. He was needed to keep the elder son in check. For now, he could not be touched. Julian poured him a glass of water. He asked gently if the general was tired. Ethan felt a mix of emotions. He looked into Julian's gentle eyes. He told him everything that happened. Julian's brow furrowed slightly. The patriarch would not harm Ethan's family. Ethan had figured this out on the way. He had secured the nation's northern territories. The old patriarch had said so himself. As long as he wore his uniform, he would always be the nation's protector. That was not the problem. He was willing to guard the frontier. It was his family's legacy. Protecting the nation was his duty. But he paced the room restlessly. Julian was confused. He asked what was troubling him. Ethan leaned on the table, looking down. He asked if Julian had ever thought of leaving. Julian looked back at him, puzzled. He asked why he would think that. Ethan's frustration flared. If Julian stayed with him, he would have to wear those ridiculous things forever. Ridiculous things? Julian seemed offended by the remark. He said they were gilded pins and golden earrings. He had chosen the most expensive items. He did it to uphold the general's reputation. They were bought with real money. They were not ridiculous things. Ethan had never seen him so animated. He forgot his own anger for a moment. He was momentarily speechless. He blinked his eyes and told him to calm down. Julian smoothed his sleeves and crossed his arms. He looked up at Ethan defiantly. He had said it before. He wore those clothes willingly. Why did the general not believe him? Said it before? A twinkle appeared in Julian's eyes. His smile was bright and intense. His easy manner made Ethan blush. He did not know he could be so flustered. He coughed into his fist. He awkwardly looked away. Julian saw his mood had improved. He asked if the general was feeling better. Ethan realized what Julian was doing. He was trying to cheer him up. He nodded his head. He admitted he felt a bit better. Julian then said he had one more question. Ethan told him to ask. Julian's eyes were bright and alluring. He asked if the earrings really looked bad. The frustration in his heart was gone. Ethan raised an eyebrow. He lifted Julian's chin playfully. He said they looked good, but the earrings were too plain for him. There was a pair of white jade earrings, a tribute from a foreign land. He would get them for him tomorrow. Julian tilted his head back cooperatively. He laughed and called him a bandit. Ethan clicked his tongue. Bandits steal in the dark. He would ask the patriarch for them openly. That night, he sent a formal request. The old man had already been going to bed, but he got up when he heard about it. He wanted to see the reason for the request. In the end, he cursed Ethan for being insane. He gave him the earrings and other treasures. Ethan ignored the other items. He found the jade box with the earrings. He left the rest in the treasury. When he presented the earrings to Julian, he found him reading a military text. Julian looked up from his book. He smiled at Ethan warmly. Ethan gestured with his chin. He told him to see if he liked them. Julian put down his book and opened the box. Ethan glanced inside. The white jade was carved with intricate patterns. A small red coral bead was set in the center. Julian asked if he should wear them now. His white sleeve fanned out on the desk. He looked at the earrings and asked softly. Ethan leaned back in his chair. He told Julian the choice was his. He should wear them if he wanted to. Then Ethan would enjoy seeing them. Julian carefully closed the box. Ethan sat up straight. He felt a pang of anxiety. Did he not like them? But Julian smiled. Such beautiful things should be worn on a special day. Ethan's tension melted away. He could not help but shake his head and smile. He was completely captivated by this man. He picked up the book Julian was reading. He noted his recent time spent in the library. He was surprised Julian liked these topics. He looked at the other books. There were texts on military strategy. There were also books about the northern frontier. He asked why he was reading them. He could just ask him directly. The frontier was his second home. He had guarded it for years. It held a special place in his heart. Its details were etched into his soul. Julian smiled faintly. He had been busy with military affairs. Julian did not want to disturb him. Remembering his meeting, Ethan sighed. He said they would depart in 3 days. He thought they had a month. The patriarch had told him about new intelligence. Ethan rubbed his temples wearily. There was a traitor on the frontier. If he did not return soon, everything he built would be lost. He sat up, a determined look on his face. This time, Julian would stand by his side. He would be there as a man. On the day of departure, banners filled the sky. The army moved out under the bright sun. Their armor gleamed. The soldiers carried the hopes of their families. They marched toward an uncertain fate. When would they return? Where would they end up? Nothing was certain. All Ethan could do was his best. He would bring them all home. After a month of hard travel, they reached the northern frontier. To protect Julian's identity, Ethan told everyone he was a hired strategist. The general's wife was following behind. She would arrive at a later date. Julian sat at a table, dressed in simple blue. A silver mask rested beside him. He seemed to be waiting for someone. Ethan placed a tray of food on the table. Julian turned his head. He saw Ethan staring at the jade earrings. He smiled and asked what he thought. Did the general find them pleasing? More than pleasing, Ethan replied. He wanted to give him every beautiful thing. Julian could just sit there, adorned in jewels, and Ethan would be happy all day. Julian laughed softly. He said after the war was over, when the world was at peace, he would dress in finery every day, just for the general to see. Seeing Ethan's silence, Julian's smile faded. He asked if something was wrong. Scouts had reported enemy movement. They were camped 30 miles away. The attack would come within 2 days. The traitor had not yet been found. This decree could save their lives. He took out the document from the patriarch. His expression was solemn. He told Julian his life was in his hands. The great battle was imminent. A letter arrived from his father. Contained only a few words. "Son, fight well. I am fine. Do not worry." His mother had died long ago. His father was a gruff man of war. He raised a son of iron will. There was no room for sentimentality. In past battles, he was fearless. He fought with reckless abandon. Death in battle was an honorable end. But this time was different. He had someone to live for. He wanted to see a peaceful world with him. Julian was adjusting Ethan's armor. He noticed Ethan's intense gaze. He turned to look back at him. Their eyes met, full of unspoken words. Julian came over and took his hand. He told Ethan not to let him be a burden. Tomorrow they would achieve a great victory. Ethan's hesitation vanished. He laughed heartily. Of course, he had never known defeat. He heard the enemy king had a priceless gem. Tomorrow he would take it. He would give it to Julian as a gift. Julian's eyes shone brightly. He said he would await the general's return. The next day at dawn, the war drums sounded. The battlefield erupted with shouts. According to the plan, Ethan led a squadron. He would lure the enemy into a narrow pass. His second-in-command would attack from behind. It was supposed to be a decisive blow, but after hours of fierce fighting, he saw no sign of his army's banner. It did not take long to realize who the traitor was. In the distance, he saw his second-in-command. He was kneeling before the enemy general. He was offering him the command seal. The enemy circle tightened around them. Ethan's eyes burned with rage. He gripped his spear tightly. He could not fall now. He had to hold out until reinforcements came. The nation, his family, the people, they were all waiting for the outcome. If he failed now, his family's legacy would be destroyed. The people would suffer. The uniform he wore would lose all meaning. He cut down an approaching enemy. He barely managed to stay on his horse. At this rate, he would die of exhaustion. In his desperation, he heard a horse's cry, cut through the chaos of battle. A large cavalry force charged toward them, but one rider stood out. The leader wore light, silver armor. Julian. It was Julian. Ethan's eyes grew hot with emotion. He roared to his men. Reinforcements had arrived. They had to fight their way out. Hope reawakened the weary soldiers. They screamed and brandished their weapons. They would protect the general. They would fight to the death. Julian wielded a long sword. He carved a bloody path toward Ethan. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he was right about Julian. That first punch had revealed his true nature. He was no ordinary man. The setting sun cast a golden glow. The field was littered with bodies. On a white horse, Julian was a divine sight. He wore a mask and silver armor. For years to come, that image would remain etched in Ethan's mind. Julian reined in his horse. He dismounted and strode through the smoke. He pulled Ethan into a fierce embrace. Ethan could not see his face, but his trembling arms revealed his fear. The familiar, clean scent calmed Ethan's heart. He laughed and cried with relief. He told Julian he gave him an order. He was supposed to use the decree. He should have sent the reserve commander. Why did he come himself? Strategists do not belong on the battlefield. Julian's voice trembled. He could not stay behind. He had to come for his general. The reddish sunset painted the field. Crows perched on the dead, crying mournfully. The reserve commander pursued the fleeing enemy. Ethan was exhausted, but his spirit was high. Julian's armor was splattered with blood. He wiped the blood from Ethan's face. The jade earrings and the mask. They gave him a dangerous, alluring look. His gentle eyes were gone. He smiled with a sharp edge. How did he do? Did his general's wife bring him shame? Your wife is magnificent. I never knew you could use a sword. Mister. Sterling sent me to a monastery for years. The masters there taught me. It seems the skills were not wasted. General. Julian called his name softly. I can wear a dress for you. Or I can wear armor for you. Ethan looked at the smile in his eyes. He laughed freely. To have you is my greatest fortune. The peace after the war felt surreal. Ethan stood on the high walls of the fort. He watched the merchants travel below. He felt a deep sense of contentment. A few months ago, this was a wasteland. He sighed. The people were safe and prosperous. This was the meaning of his sacrifice. Beside him stood Julian. He wore a necklace with a brilliant gem. He asked about Ethan's future plans. When the birds are gone, the bow is stored. Yesterday, he handed over his command seal. The patriarch wanted him to return. He had refused. He was used to the frontier. The capital felt foreign to him now. He turned to look at Julian's mask. And what about you? Do you want to take off the mask? That wife's finery, do you still want to wear it? Julian answered decisively. No and yes. You'll have to wear it for a lifetime. Julian was unconcerned. As long as I can stand by your side. A lifetime is fine. He turned to look at Ethan. His eyes were clear and bright. The general stays here to watch the new allies. He looked at Ethan with a soft smile. The general's wish is to guard the frontier. Julian's voice was gentle, full of devotion. So for this lifetime, you guard the frontier. And I will guard you. Ethan's heart shook, his mind reeling. He thought the frontier had hardened him. But Julian's words brought tears to his eyes. What do you want? Just tell me, and I will get it for you. Julian pulled him into an embrace. He whispered by his ear, to find mutual love is rare enough. As long as your heart is like my heart, I want for nothing more. Ethan wrapped his arms around his waist. In the sunset, the red coral on the jade earrings captured all of his attention. Julian never took off those earrings again, and Ethan never looked away.